welcome to another episode of Beer for Breakfast ABV. I am Danielle from Marty and Danielle in the mornings on 91X. As always, I have my beer drinking partner in crime with me, Paul Segura, brewmaster of Karl Strauss. And today we have Tom Nickel, owner of Nickel Beer Company out in Julian. Welcome, Tom.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to see you again. We had you on in September for O'Brien's.
Yep.
Season. And I was just out in Julian over the weekend visiting you guys. October in Julian, you can't ask for a whole lot more. And I was so impressed with your entire beer list. So welcome back. I'm stoked that you're here.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. And you really did pick a near perfect weekend. We've been obviously, like most of the county, hot, and it's just finally kind of settling into those shorter days, little cool nights. Leaves are just finally starting to turn, so it really is feeling like fall up here.
When is the apple harvest out there?
Well, it's pretty much already over for the most part. So our apple season typically starts in August, and it's probably by October 1st, the vast majority of the apples are picked. There are a few late season Granny Smiths up here, black wine saps, but most of the apples are picked by October 1st. So all the you-pick orchards are already done for the season. But we are still getting one more round of apples to brew our apple pie ale with, which I know is coming up here in just a second. But yeah, it's cool. There's a bunch of crab apples up here that can be picked as early as July. Yeah, typically the latest apples would be mid-October. But yeah, our apple season's a little bit earlier than a lot of places.
So maybe just a little bit before the local hop harvest.
Exactly. Yeah, very, very closely intertwined. And it's funny because, people often wait for the weather to turn so they can see the fall color and think, oh, great, we'll go up there, we'll go apple picking and enjoy the fall weather. And by the time the fall weather hits, apple season's actually already over. So, but you can definitely tell it's fall by the long line at Mom's Pies in town.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, let's get into the apple pie ale. So we're actually going to make ice cream floats, but I did want to take just a taste of it before I add it into the ice cream.
Me too.
Cheers, guys.
Color is beautiful. Kind of slight copper color.
Yeah, so this beer has three components. So you think about apple pie having a crust, an apple flavor, and then the filling flavor. So the malt is a lot of biscuity toasted malt. So there's obviously biscuit malt, Munich, Vienna, wheat, all making up that kind of malty crust. Then it's about 48% of the fermentables come from local Julian apples. And so that kind of makes up the apple part of the apple pie. And then it's spiced with your classic apple pie spices. So ginger, nutmeg, cinnamon, allspice, and clove. And so that kind of creates the filling pie part, of it. So you've got the malt, the apples, and the spices kind of combining to give you that full apple pie flavor. And what you guys are doing is apple pie ale a la mode.
It's really nicely balanced between beer and sort of cider.
Yeah.
You totally get the apple and the spices, but you also get the bready, sort of crust-like flavors from all the malts that you've used as well. It's nicely done.
Yeah, it's a really cool, unique beer because it really does have a lot of cider characteristics, and it has a lot of spice beer characteristics, and then it still has, to me, a good backbone of just basic beer flavor. So, more slowly, it will foam up.
Don't make a mess.
All over my keyboard.
Do with adult supervision. So when I was out there and we were discussing which beers we should have on Beer for Breakfast, and I saw the apple pie, and I was like, well, that's interesting. Totally expecting a very sweet beer. Did not get a sweet beer when I tasted it. But then when you mentioned that you had an ice cream social and used this beer, I was like, well, we've got to. We've got to. Right. This is delicious.
So yes, this is thanks to the Julian Historical Society. We have hosted their ice cream social every year except this year, And, I always thought, I would always have a variety of dark beers, if we had our porter on tap or our imperial stout or our Stonewall stout, which is our year-round stout, or we did a vanilla chocolate version of our Stonewall stout. I always tried to make sure I loaded up on dark beers for this event. And one time we were there and somebody's like, well, I'm going to do my ice cream, my beer float with the apple pie. And I thought, well, that's weird. But then we tasted it and I'm like, oh my God, of course. It's just apple pie a la mode in a glass with 6% alcohol. So ever since then, it's been my absolute favorite. And I like it way better than any dark beer ice cream float I've ever had.
It's growing on me, but the first sip was kind of strange and awkward because it's slightly dry. It doesn't have a lot of residual sugar. And then the apple just kind of takes over and mingles with the vanilla in a really cool way.
Yeah.
I'm used to having dark beers, in beer floats. This is my first experience with like an apple pie.
Right. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I like it more or not yet. I think I need to have some more of this.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, it could just be, the dark beers that we have, because like our stout is definitely very like coffee note heavy. And so I think, there's certain maltier dark beers. Like I almost think like a Bock could make a better ice cream float than certain stouts, because I think sometimes if a stout's too roasty, too coffee-ish, it's too strong. But like a milder stout, or like I said, even like a double Bock, would be super nice. Like I would think like Aventinus would make an incredible ice cream float.
Yeah, nice.
So, with all those fruity Hefeweizen flavors and notes in it.
Well, that was the other reason I wanted to do the beer float on Beer for Breakfast. We've never done a beer float on Beer for Breakfast. And also, you just don't think that ice cream and beer should go together, because we don't really put dairy and booze. It doesn't always end up well. But this is amazing.
Except for all those people who do IPA milkshakes that shouldn't. Ooh.
You know who you are.
You shouldn't be adding lactose to IPAs.
That feels like sacrilege.
Seriously.
So, Tom, can you kind of just give us an update on what's been going on with Nickel Beer Company? I mean, obviously, times are really weird in the age of Rona, and things are consistently changing. Yeah. Hooray for not going into the purple tier this week. Yeah. Good job, San Diego County. Keep up the good work. But what's going on out there?
So it's definitely impacted us. We're kind of in an interesting catch-22 with the county in that our area where we are is zoned industrially. So per county zoning regulations, we are not allowed to manufacture food on site. Per county health ordinances, we are not allowed to serve pints without having food. So we basically have to have an outside food vendor provide food in order for us to be open for anything other than growlers and keg sales. But so right now we're doing that. We have just been doing Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We just started opening Thursday through Sunday, doing pints with food. So it's just, it's kind of a crapshoot up here, during the week with Julian. Sometimes you're busy, sometimes you're not. But certainly the weekends have been good, with people coming up for the fall weather and just getting out of town. People aren't traveling on airplanes or out of country. So at least the staycation or the near vacation idea has been doing well for us. And certainly, I'm pleasantly surprised that we're still selling, some beer out at accounts and bars and restaurants. And certainly, with it being wet hop season, and we've done 7 wet hop beers so far. That getting some of those down the hill has been great to get those beers out and about. So
anybody out there missed any of the wet hop beers? We did feature some on our show about 5 weeks ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So you can go back retroactively and review those. They were amazing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite things. And, COVID impacted the local hop harvest dramatically. There were a couple of, long-term hop farms that didn't do anything this year. And, a couple of new farms that were so new that, they didn't really have a lot of hops yet because they're only in their first or second year. So this was probably the lowest hop season we've had in terms of locally grown hops, in almost a decade. So it definitely was a negative in that factor. But having brewed with mostly local hops before, it gave us an opportunity to get some hops from other areas. So we got wet hops from as far away as Michigan that were overnighted sent out on a Southwest flight air cargo that we went down to the airport to pick up. And the guys are like, "Are those hops?" Yes, they are. Those will be beer this afternoon. And then we got a lot of hops from Crosby Brewing up in Oregon, which was really cool. So we were able to brew with like Idaho 7 and Strata and some different hop Centennial, which we'll taste next, that we've never been able to brew with down here because they're not grown down here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of hops, I'm kind of anxious to dive into this IPA that we're also going to be tasting.
Let's do it.
Because it's got a great name. And I said, speaking of hops, because the man that this IPA is named after, I believe, is Mr. Ralph Olsen, n'est-ce pas?
It is. Yeah, good show, Mr. Olson. So this is all Centennial hopped wet hop IPA.
So for people who know the sort of interrupted story the last time we had you on, maybe you can sort of rehash who Mr. Olson is and what his relationship to Centennial hops might be.
Yeah, so Ralph Olson is now retired, but a long time hop grower, hop broker, owner of Hop Union in the Yakima, Washington area, been in the business since the 70s. So he was there during all the seminal moments of, craft breweries growing up. When Fitz Maytag, revived the IPA as a style with Liberty Ale. So he's seen everything happen from, zero craft brewing to thousands of craft breweries in his career, and a huge supporter of everything craft brewers did, and just an all-around nice guy. And as Paul pointed out last time, the two guys that ran Hop Union were Ralph and Ralph. Kind of funny. So Ralph Olson and Ralph Woodall. But so Ralph Olson in the 70s and early 80s would participate in these grower meetings where they would, the USDA would come up with new hops, breeders would come up with new hops. And back then it was mostly just big breweries looking for hops that were highly efficient to bitter and balance their beers, that didn't have too much flavor. Because of course, most people are baffled that like Coors uses a blend of 13 different hops. And people think like, if you advertise that as a craft brewer, we use 13 different hops. It's because you're saying, hey, we use 13 different hops to create tons of different layers of flavor. Coors does the exact opposite. Coors uses 13 hops to create no flavor spikes across the board. So if any one is a little stronger or a little weaker year to year, you don't taste the difference. So they use a blend of 13 hops precisely to nullify flavor, whereas craft brewers would do the exact opposite. They would use 13 varieties of hops to maximize flavor. So most of what was being bred in the 70s and 80s was not very exciting, would not excite anybody who liked Mosaic or Citra or Simcoe or Amarillo or any of the popular IPA hops. And so there was a hop, I believe it was like TFG 1190. Well, all the hops are given an experimental name. And so they're in the broker meeting. Everybody's like, okay, what do you think of this TFG 1190? And everybody's like, I don't know. It's this, it's that, too much of that. We don't like it, not strong enough. Ralph kind of puts his hands up as he tells the story. And he's like, well, I got a bike shop owner down in Chico who's buying a lot of this hop. And he really likes it. I think we should keep it. Well, Ralph was voted down. But it turns out that bike shop owner in Chico was none other than Ken Grossman, the founder of Sierra Nevada, who was in his previous life an avid cycler, cycling enthusiast, and sold and repaired bikes for touring. And so Ralph comes back and he's like, he talks to the grower where he's only got like 2 or 3 acres of this TFG 1190. And he says, hey, we voted it down, but if you're okay with it, I'd like to keep growing it so I can keep selling it to this guy down in Chico. So they keep doing it. And Ralph goes from 2 acres to 4 acres to 8 acres over the years. And finally, he starts feeling guilty. So he goes in to talk to a guy at the USDA lab. And he said, hey, you remember that hop TFG 1190? The guy's like, oh, yeah, it was a great little hop. I thought we destroyed that a couple of years ago. And Ralph's like, well, we were supposed to, but I might have about 8 acres of it, and I've been selling it to Sierra Nevada this whole time. And the USDA guy, instead of like freaking out and saying, oh my God, what a terrible thing you've done, he's like, oh my God, Ralph, that's great, but we've got to completely rename this hop. You can't tell anybody you've done this. Like, this is completely illegal. Once a hop is destroyed, it's supposed to be destroyed. You can't tell anybody that you've done this. And so it just so happened that year was the centennial for the state of Washington. So they renamed it Centennial, repackaged it, sent it out there, and literally you can rarely say, like, if not for this one person, this one thing would not exist. But in this case, you can say, if not for Ralph Olsen, the Centennial hop would have just been destroyed as part of a random breeding program. And somebody might have come up with something close years later. But you think about some of the iconic beers. I mean, Two Hearted, Sierra Nevada Celebration, beers that are just defined by Centennial hops. And I've used it in every flagship IPA I've ever brewed at every brewery I've ever been at. And, I just can't imagine craft brewing without Centennial hops. So first time we got to brew a wet hop with it, this was an absolute tip of the hat to Mr. Ralph Olsen and everything that he's done, not just for this hop, but just for the craft brewing community in general.
Well, good show, Mr. Olsen.
Good show, Mr. Olsen.
Mr. Olsen. And I commend you on your use of Centennials. It's one of my favorite hops as well.
Yeah.
One of my favorite beers was a beer that Lee Chase and I did for the centennial anniversary of Balboa Park. And we made a beer that was 100 IBUs using just Centennials. And it was fun. It was delicious. It was great. Your IPA is sort of almost a cross between Two Hearted and Celebration. It's got a really nice maltiness, slightly sweet, and then the hop flavor just takes over, and you get every bit of that Centennial. It's really nice.
Yeah, so this was, since it was a wet hop IPA, we do things a little differently. So there's actually, for people who know about brewing, there's no kettle hops in this whatsoever. So we do some whole flower hops in the mash. So it's actually, this beer is not only 100% Centennial, but also 100% flower hop. So we do our hour-long mash rest, then add some flower hops into the mash, do our Vorloff recirculation, then run off into the kettle. So no hops actually in the kettle while we're boiling. Then we use our mash tun as a giant hop container to basically run the beer through that before we cool down into the fermenter. So it was 80 pounds, so just over 10 pounds per barrel of wet Centennial hops in the mash tun. And so the bitterness is a little more subdued because we really wanted to play out on that massively fresh Centennial flavor. And we got these from North Country Hops. And so one of the really cool things they did was they steam distill some of their hop harvest in the field. So we actually used a steam distilled distillate in the conditioning tank to dry hop it.
Wow.
So it's a combination of some things we've never done before, but really cool beer, really happy with the way it came out, and just really happy with the piney, citrusy Centennial expression.
You're right about when you said the bitterness is subdued. It is, but you get all the hop flavor. You don't get much bitterness, but you get total hop flavor. It's amazing. Yeah. I think you're onto something with this, man. Yeah. This is really amazing. I don't even know how to explain it to people who haven't had the opportunity to taste this yet.
They just need to go try it. That's all there is to it. They just need to go try it.
To go up the hill to Julian, right there. You know what? You get in there. Instead of going left to Julian, you go right. And Nickel Beer Company is right there. I would totally commend you on the barbecue that you have there. That was some of the best barbecue that I've had. The atmosphere was great. If you have not had the opportunity to get out to Nickel Beer Company in Julian, you are really missing out. And this is the perfect time of year to get out there. And, as we are continuing to help small businesses, where your dollars go really, really matters. So if you can't get out to Julian, you still have O'Brien's right there in Kearney Mesa, as well as West Coast Tap and Smokehouse in La Mesa. They both carry Nickel Beer Company beer, and they are just phenomenal businesses as well.
Well, thank you very much for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for people who do come up, and not only fall, like I said, is a great time to come to Julian, but we'll have 6 wet hop beers on tap in the tasting room. Whenever anybody would come up. So, and like I said, we've still got one to go that's been brewed, but not yet on tap. So it'll be a good stuff coming. And we actually just did a collab beer that'll be out in a couple of weeks with Sean McElhaney, soon to be of McElhaney Brewing. So yeah, something that we'll be releasing for Beer Week. however it exists. So we did, it's a 79 to Julian. So it's a Strata and Idaho 7 hopped IPA.
Ooh. Oh no, it was OG 40. That's I was at O'Brien's for Wet Hop Fest and I saw one with McElhenney Brewing, but it was original 40.
Right, he just did, yeah. So they're not brewing. Yeah, McElhenney's not operating yet, even though they're just taking over, their old space for Alpine, but they have to get a whole new license. So they're probably not going to be actually brewing until early 2021, because apparently the ABC is moving even slower than usual during COVID, which is hard to imagine for those of you who had to deal with the ABC. But so Sean's out there doing a lot of collabs right now just to kind of, get back into it, talk to people, get the name out there, let it be known that, hey, we're not going to be Alpine anymore, but we're going to be McElhenney Brewing. He had a great story the other day to tell, too. He was wearing a McElhenney Tabasco sauce shirt at the tasting room before it shut down. And the guy goes, "Oh, my God, great shirt." And Sean goes, "Yeah, it's my last name." The guy looks at him and goes, "Your last name is Tabasco?"
Yes. Oh,
Sean didn't even respond to that. He just walked away, just like, I'm going to let that guy think my last name is Tabasco.
Very fun, McElhenney. We will for sure be having the McElhenneys on Beer for Breakfast as soon as they are up and running. Tom Nickel, thank you so much for joining us for Beer for Breakfast ABV today. You are a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
And a mad scientist out there in Julian. Please continue to make amazing beers.
We will absolutely do so. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
Everybody get out there and get that apple pie beer before it's gone and scoop up some ice cream on that. Get on that.
Oh, yeah.
And this wet hop beer is amazing too. Like, everybody go. Got to get out there.
For sure. And make sure you join us on Friday morning for Beer for Breakfast at 9:10. We will be drinking beer from Nickel Beer Company. That is at 91X at 9:10 here in San Diego. Thank you so much. And cheers to independently owned craft beer and radio in San Diego.
Cheers.
91X.